When a story breaks or a new app goes viral, the quiet background hum of the internet turns into a roar. Millions of automated calls start hammering the same endpoints. Some systems ride the wave smoothly, others stall, time out, or fall over. The difference isn't just bigger servers, it's smarter traffic control. An API is a service that lets software talk to software. It's like a front desk that answers structured questions quickly and predictably. The special challenge with APIs is that clients are automated. They don't get tired and they don't pause. 10 users can suddenly become 10 million requests because a single app can loop or retry or fan out across many devices at once. Why care about this? Because reliability shows up as human experience. A checkout button that spins, a ride request that fails, a weather alert that arrives after the storm passes. For the teams behind these APIs, the stakes include fairness, making sure one heavy user doesn't drown everyone else, and cost, because every wasted call burns money. Picture a busy restaurant. There's a host at the door who controls the flow of tables so the dining room doesn't overflow. The kitchen has prepped the popular dishes so they're ready in seconds. Tickets line up for anything that takes longer to cook, and the staff works through them steadily. If things get slammed, the sign flips to busy, check back soon, so people don't pile inside. That's how APIs scale too. The host is rate limiting and backpressure, the prepped dishes are caching, and the ticket rail is a queue. So the simple version is control how fast work arrives, answer repeats from memory, and smooth the rest through a buffer. That's how a service stays fast and fair when the crowd shows up. Now zoom in on a single request hitting a modern API. The first thing greeting that call is usually an API gateway or some middleware, a layer that inspects who's asking and how often. Clients identify themselves with an API key, a token, sometimes an IP address. This identity matters because limits apply per client. Without that, a single noisy neighbor could monopolize shared resources. The gateway checks a counter in a short time window. Think of a bucket that slowly refills with tokens, and each request spends one token. That's the token bucket idea. It allows a little burst if tokens have accumulated, but not an endless flood. Under the limit, the request continues. If the bucket is empty, the answer is clear and quick. Too many requests. That's HTTP 429, the industry's way of saying there's nothing wrong with the request itself, but slow down. Sometimes the response includes a retry after header, which is just a hint for when it's safe to try again. Here's the thing, giving that signal early protects everything behind it. Backpressure is the general term for telling upstream callers to ease off when downstream capacity is tight. It's like a pressure valve. When the service is saturated, returning a fast 429 or even a brief service unavailable, HTTP 503, stops a pileup that would make latency worse for everyone. Let that sink in for a moment. Stability often comes from refusing work quickly rather than trying to do everything slowly. Assuming the request is allowed, the next stop is a cache. A cache is memory set aside for answers that get asked over and over. If a popular result is already there, it can be returned in microseconds. No database, no heavy computation. When a cache hit happens, both speed and cost improve. Latency drops to near zero, and resources that would have been used to recompute are saved for other work. In other words, caching is the equivalent of the restaurant's prepped dishes. If 80% of diners order fries, having baskets ready matters more than anything else. In APIs, the fries are often things like user profile snapshots, product listings, or current weather in New York during a storm. These answers change, but not every second. A time to live, commonly called a TTL, controls how long to keep a cached answer before refreshing it, which balances freshness with speed. What if the answer isn't in cache, or the work is slow? This is where queuing comes in. Instead of blocking the caller while slow work happens, the service puts a message into a queue. Workers pick up messages at a steady rate, do the heavy lifting, and store the result. The caller gets a quick acknowledgement and can come back later, or gets a push notification when the result is ready. That queue is the kitchen ticket rail. It smooths out spikes because bursts of traffic turn into a backlog that the system chews through at a sustainable pace rather than all at once. What matters here is that rate limits, caches, and queues aren't separate tricks. They work together like different parts of the same traffic system. Limits keep the highway from gridlock. Caches act like express lanes for familiar trips. Queues are the on-ramps that meter cars during rush hour so the whole road keeps moving. Follow the rest of the path. Past cache and queue decisions, requests head to internal services and databases. This area is where failures can bounce around if left unchecked. If a database is slow or a downstream microservice is failing, it's easy to keep retrying and fill every connection, dragging the entire system down. So services put isolation barriers in place. Timeouts cut off calls that take too long. Retries happen, but not instantly and not forever. There's a technique called exponential backoff, which means each retry waits a bit longer than the last, with a little randomness, often called jitter, so thousands of clients don't retry in lockstep. There's also a pattern named a circuit breaker. When a dependency is misbehaving, the breaker flips open, preventing new calls for a short period. During that time, the service either returns a fallback or a fast error instead of getting stuck. These isolation patterns are sometimes called bulkheads, like compartments on a ship that keep a leak from sinking everything at once. Here's a concrete story to make this tangible. Imagine a weather API serving 1 million daily users. Most days, it handles around 1,000 requests per second. Then a storm hits New York, and a news app starts pinging for current temperature in NYC 10,000 times per second. At the gate, the service recognizes the app's API key. The limit is set with a token bucket that allows up to 500 requests per minute from that client. Requests above that line get a 429 with a retry after of 60 seconds. That seems harsh until remembering the alternative. The flood would crowd out other users completely. For the requests that do get through, the cache is hot. NYC current temp has a 5-minute TTL. Most calls are served from memory in under a millisecond, skipping the database entirely. That absorbs the spike. The less common 7-day forecast requests are different. They involve stitching multiple data sources and take hundreds of milliseconds. Those get queued to a message system, and a pool of workers processes 100 per second, storing the result. The queue backlog peaks at 5,000 and clears in under a minute. Now imagine the database slows down. Queries are configured to time out at 200 milliseconds. The circuit breaker opens for about 30 seconds, returning a fast fallback that says temporarily unavailable, rather than leaving callers hanging indefinitely. Through all this, the overall success rate stays high, and 99.9% of requests finish under 100 milliseconds, even during the spike. Put differently, the system stays honest about what it can do right now and doesn't pretend to handle infinite load. That honesty is what saves it. A natural question comes up. Why not just add more servers? Scale out helps, and cloud platforms make it practical. But capacity isn't infinite, and the economics matter. There are bottlenecks that don't scale linearly: databases, third-party APIs, network bandwidth, even rate limits from upstream providers. A single runaway client can create costs and slowdowns for everyone else. Fairness in multi-tenant systems, places where many customers share the same platform, depends on shaping demand as much as increasing supply. The key idea is that these controls serve people, not just machines. A developer receiving a 429 isn't being punished. That status code is a clear message to slow down, rather than a mystery timeout. A product manager seeing a cache in front of a heavy endpoint is buying speed and saving budget. A customer who clicks refresh shouldn't pay for a server meltdown. None of this is free. There are trade-offs worth surfacing. Aggressive rate limits reduce overload, but can frustrate clients if set too low. Caches return results fast, but they can be stale. The TTL is a dial that balances freshness with hit rate. Queues smooth spikes, yet they add delay for anything pushed to the background. Distributed rate limiting also has its own complexity. When many API gateways run in multiple regions, the system needs a shared view of usage to enforce limits accurately. That often means a central store, like a Redis cluster, to hold counters or token buckets. This introduces a new dependency. If that store goes down, limits get fuzzy. Sharding counters across regions or using consistent hashing helps spread the load, but the design has to consider failure paths from the start. Clarity in error handling becomes essential during overload. Not all errors mean the same thing. A 429 says the client exceeded a configured limit and should slow down or wait. A 503 means the service is not available right now, often due to maintenance or sudden saturation. So a longer backoff makes sense. Blindly retrying aggressively turns a small hiccup into a spike because all those retries arrive together and magnify the problem. Backoff with jitter, adding randomness, breaks that synchronization. So let's slow that down for a second. Decent behavior under stress looks like this: limit the fastest talkers first, honor cacheable results whenever safe, push slow work to a queue instead of making everyone wait, and use clear signals to nudge clients to behave well during peak times. It helps to carry the restaurant picture a little further. The host doesn't just look at the door, they know how many tables the servers can handle. A well-run kitchen preps to match demand, not to cook every possible dish instantly. When tickets pile up, they don't accept 100 more orders right now, they pace them. And if the fryer breaks, the staff doesn't keep sending fries orders into a black hole. They cut the menu temporarily and keep the rest of the service running. APIs do the same with bulkheads and circuit breakers. How do teams decide what to cache versus what to queue? A practical rule is to cache anything read far more often than written, and where a tiny delay in freshness is acceptable. Small responses, on the order of a kilobyte, are easy wins. User profiles, product catalogs, public content, health checks, these are typical cache candidates. For long or heavy tasks, processing images, generating reports, sending emails, queues shine. If the work takes more than a few tens of milliseconds or relies on flaky external systems, decoupling it into a background workflow keeps the front of house fast. Over time, measures like P95 latency, the time under which 95% of requests finish, guide tuning. If P95 drifts upward, limits might be too loose or caches might be missing heat. If spikes cause queue backlogs that take hours to drain, more workers or smarter batching might be needed. Data tells the story, but the framework stays the same. Protect the core and shape the demand to match the supply. Another subtlety is idempotency, making sure repeating the same request has the same result. That matters for retries. If a client sends "charge this card" twice because the first response timed out, it shouldn't double bill. Designing endpoints to be idempotent when possible makes retries safe. Paired with backoff, it's a quiet guardian against self-inflicted outages. There's also graceful degradation, which is just a fancy way of saying, when things get tight, do the most important parts well and temporarily trim the extras. For example, during a surge, an API might skip analytics logging, reduce response payloads, or serve slightly stale data from cache rather than failing outright. Users prefer a quick, slightly old answer to no answer at all, especially when the alternative is a spinning loader. What about global systems? A multi-region API adds new wrinkles. Rate limits need to be enforced fairly across regions. Caches can be regional to keep latency low. Queues may be local or replicated. The guiding principle doesn't change. Keep the controls close to where they're needed. Gateways in each region apply per client limits. Regional caches serve nearby users. Queues absorb local spikes. Cross-region coordination is minimized to avoid turning one region's hiccup into a global outage. A quick word on fairness. In shared platforms, customers don't just share compute, they share attention. Without careful limits, the exciting new client of the day can steal that attention from quiet, long-time users. Per-client quotas and burst limits align resources with expectations, so 100 small customers still get good service when a single giant shows up. Fairness, in the end, is a reliability feature. Misconceptions deserve a brief address. Throwing more servers at the problem helps only up to the bottleneck. Caching is powerful, but not everything can be cached, and not forever. Some requests are unique, and invalidation, replacing stale entries, requires careful thought. Retries aren't a magic fix for errors. Undisciplined retries can double traffic at the worst possible time. Smart backoff, clear error codes, and limits at the edge form a pattern that prevents these from spiraling. For those planning a new API or revisiting an existing one, a sensible starting point is simple and observable. Begin with a reasonable per-client limit, high enough for normal use, low enough to keep P95 latency healthy, and adjust based on real traffic. Add a cache for the most frequent reads with a TTL that matches how fresh the data truly needs to be. Push obviously slow work to a queue and size workers to keep backlogs bounded. Wrap downstream calls with timeouts and a circuit breaker. Then watch the dashboards and refine. The practical payoffs extend beyond uptime. Cost predictability improves because the system refuses wasteful load early. User satisfaction improves because common paths feel instant. Engineering velocity improves because a smooth queue and a hot cache free the database from doing the same expensive thing thousands of times. It's worth emphasizing the social contract embedded in this design. A rate limit isn't an arbitrary wall. It's a transparent boundary that says, here's what this service can deliver reliably. A 429 with retry after is an invitation to coordinate. A cache hit is a courtesy that rewards common behavior with speed. A queue acknowledgement says, the request is in motion, and the system will carry it to completion. These signals turn a chaotic flood into a steady stream. If one detail should stick, it's the restaurant picture. To stay fast under pressure, APIs behave like a well-run dining room. The host meters the door so guests get served instead of crowding the hall. The kitchen keeps the favorites ready to go. The ticket rail evens out the rush. And when a station goes down, the staff isolates the problem and keeps the rest of the service moving. Taken together, the mental model is straightforward. Control the inflow with fair limits and clear back pressure. Serve repeat answers from a cache that trades a little freshness for a lot of speed. Offload long, unpredictable, or failure-prone work to a queue so bursts are smoothed and the front end stays responsive. Protect the system from its dependencies with timeouts, back-off, and circuit breakers. Do these things, and a viral moment becomes a success story rather than an outage post-mortem. Scaling isn't about brute force alone. It's mostly about shaping demand to fit supply and using memory, patience, and honesty, caches, queues, and fast please slow down signals to keep promises at scale. That approach respects users, budgets, and the reality that computers, like kitchens, have limits. If this helped, a like and subscribe helps create more videos like this.